My panel, SDP candidate Amy Gallagher, historian and royal broadcaster joins us as well, Rafe Hadel-Mancu, and assistant editor spectator Cindy Yu. Welcome back to all of you. Rafe, let me start with you because you're the royal historian here. We haven't really covered what might happen if it is the case that King Charles isn't able to perform the functions that he's supposed to perform constitutionally. What would actually happen in that case?
Well, it should be said first and foremost, of course, that we don't believe that His Majesty will be incapacitated under this current course of treatment, as we've had from that very valuable and useful talk from Dr. Sakura there. We do believe this is probably radiotherapy. However, we need to talk about these sorts of issues. Under the Regency Act of 1937, if the monarch is incapacitated, either due to ill health or to being outside of the country, then two councillors of state can act on behalf of the monarch on all matters apart from Commonwealth matters, creating peers, appointing a Prime Minister or dissolving Parliament. Although in 1974, the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret did dissolve Parliament under the express instruction of the Queen. The councillors of state are essentially the spouse of the sovereign and the next four in the line of succession over the age of 21. Now, that includes currently Prince Harry and Prince Andrew, but in November 2022 in the House of Lords, it was decreed that only working members of the royal family can actually perform that function. So they're not really councillors of state in practice. As a result of that, the King has recently announced that his sister, Princess Anne, and his brother, Prince Edward, the new Duke of Edinburgh, can fulfil those functions. So the Constitution carries on, but we know that His Majesty will continue to work on his red boxes and so forth. I mean, this man is in very, very good health. We have to remember, just yesterday, he was at Mass at Sandringham. This is a man whose only last real serious health issue was back in 1962 or 63, when he almost died of appendicitis. But since then, his only injuries have been falling off of polo horses. I mean, he's in very good health. Lots of broken bones.
And he looks after himself
serious
as well. But, I mean, I guess this is the other thing, Amy, is that, you know, Prince Charles, King Charles is somebody who has always been a relatively healthy individual. You know, apparently he doesn't eat the wrong types of food. I think he eats fish only 1 day a week and all this kind of thing. But it shows you that, you know, no matter what you do, you're going to be exposed to this kind of disease. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen in the last year he's been a very active king. And he looks, as Rafe says, he looks very well. I think people are quite surprised to find out that he's 75. I think people often think he's a lot younger than that. But yeah, it can affect anybody, especially at that age. But as Rafe says, it's not a death sentence, and it doesn't necessarily mean that he might be able to carry on just fine, and he might, with treatment, be fine. So we need to remember that.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, when these things happen, we were talking earlier with some of the other guests, it does bring into focus either your own kind of relationship with the royal family or your own kind of feelings about the country, I think. And I know a lot of people will say, well, I don't know why you keep making a big deal about it. You know, not everybody cares about the royal family. But I think most people have a relationship with the royal family, particularly over the last year since the late Queen died.
I think it does affect the mood of the nation to some degree. I think we're obviously living in quite turbulent, uncertain times, and I think this will add to that. King Charles's reign has already been quite turbulent, what with Prince Harry and with you know, lots of changes in prime ministers and so on. And I think this will just end up leaving people to feel like things are even more uncertain. And as you say, I think a cancer diagnosis for a lot of people can sharpen their focus a bit. It can mean that they end up reflecting on their life, reflecting on their future, on their legacy, and it may well be that it has the same effect for Charles to do that. And it also makes you think about your family. And we know that he hasn't seen his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, for some time. He's obviously estranged from Prince Harry. Many people are left wondering what's going to happen to their relationship, and it may well be that this is the thing that reconciles them. Who knows?
It may well do. Cindy, we've just got some of the papers come in, all, as you might not be surprised to know, with Charles on the front, with that new picture of him in his blue pinstripe suit. King's cancer shock, front of the Mirror. King, I have cancer, front of the Sun. Nation shock as treatment starts. We'll look at all of those in detail a little bit later on. But, I mean, I'm just trying to... It's always difficult to try and gauge people's reaction from looking at Twitter, or X, as it's now known. But there are still a few people out there who are kind of going, you know, what's the big deal? But it is a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a big deal in the sense that, you know, he has only been in the position for 1 year, as we've talked about. It's been a turbulent time politically and constitutionally. We're looking ahead to an election this year for sure.
Yes.
So if if this, God forbid, this illness gets worse, and when we're having to go into that kind of constitutional backup option that Rafe has just described, then it will add to the turbulence of the country. I also think it's important to talk about this just in the sense of raising awareness about cancer. And I think that's something that the show has done so well tonight is Dr. Sakura, for example, talking about the importance of early diagnosis. Early treatment, and the King coming out and encouraging people basically to check themselves out as well. And I think it's a time for us to realise that in the UK, there's such inequality when it comes to health outcomes, and nowhere is more clear than in cancer.
Yes.
Early detection has always been below NHS targets. NHS wants 75% of people to be within that early detection window. Hasn't met that target basically in recent years. And the UK also performs worse when it comes to survival rates compared to other Western developed countries. So let's talk about that. Why is that the problem? And as you say, Mike, if you're not a royal and you have cancer, you know, can we make that situation better for you through diagnosis and treatment?
Well, Rishi Sunak's interview with Piers Morgan is on after this show at 11 o'clock. One of the things he admits to failing at is bringing down the waiting list in the NHS. And a lot of the waiting lists are not just for your first consultation with a cancer specialist, but, you know, your subsequent consultations with other specialists, because you might get the first one relatively quickly, but you might be waiting for, you know, as Carol said, 60 days or so for the second one.
Yeah, and sorry.
No, my mother was a casualty of that as well, with lung cancer, had it been detected early enough. And we are at the bottom of the pile when it comes to detection of cancer, which is obviously so crucial. That's why we actually must be very thankful that His Majesty did go in for this for this prostate enlargement procedure, because otherwise this wouldn't have been detected, would it?
Yes.
And I think we should take some encouragement from that. And I think what Dr. Sakura said is very important, because there's been so much speculation in the last few hours about the fact that the Buckingham Palace did not name the type of cancer he had. But as we've heard here, even the experts don't know yet. It takes around 10 days or so. You know, the King was so forthcoming by telling people about his enlarged prostate, which saw a 1,000% increase in the number of searches on that.
Yes.
That I think, of course, he would naturally, I assume, will reveal to the public when the time is right what the cancer is, knowing how important that is actually in order to try to improve the nation's chances when they come with cancer. It should also be said, you know, the royal family do have a history of cancer. We have to remember the Queen, according to Giles Brandreth's book, had bone marrow cancer. Her father, King George VI, had lung cancer as well and died from that at a very young age. Edward VII also had cancer on the nose. So this is something to also remind people that it is a hereditary symptom.
Yes, and the more, as we say, we talk about it, the less frightening it becomes. I mean, Amy, you were in the NHS, as we said before, and this is probably not the time to go through that whole story, but we'll get you back to do that, I promise, because we would have done that earlier on. But a lot of people say that the real problem inside the NHS, in terms of people getting access to what they want, is that their priorities are all wrong, that they think about you know, making sure they're doing things in the right way as far as their, you know, diversity claims are going to be put together and all of that stuff, which gets priority instead of just clinicians being able to see more people.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's more and more money being poured into the NHS every year. It's a complete myth that the Tories have cut spending on the NHS. It's increased, but the quality has unfortunately gone down. It's not about money, it's about the way it's being spent. It's mismanagement.
Yeah.
We see, working in the NHS, I see a lot of management and administrative roles that really aren't necessary, actually, and you wouldn't really miss them if they were gone. And as you said, we see advertisements for diversity and equity officers that are six-figure salaries, and all the while, you know, frontline staff are leaving, and there's a high turnover of frontline staff. People moving overseas, people not wanting to work in the NHS anymore. So it is a real crisis, and I think, you know, it does speak to that, as Cindy was saying, the inequality that we assume King Charles will get the best possible treatment, but there are over 7 million people waiting for treatments on the NHS now, and there is a large backlog of cancer treatments who will be watching King Charles and you know, feeling some, you know, similarity with him, but also in other ways not.
Yes, exactly right. Cindy, let me talk to you about the international reaction, because we've seen Joe Biden and Donald Trump talking, sending very pleasant messages across. We'll probably see more of that as the evening wears on. But let's talk about those countries that have been forming sort of, you know, some power formation, shall we say, you know, the Saudis, the Middle East, China, Russia. You know, do they see our royal family in the same way
as what you might call the West does?
Well, I can't generalise across that axis, as it were.
I realise it's a big area.
But I think, you know, certainly from the perspective of China, and I think this goes to show the soft power of the royal family, that even in a place like China, the royal family actually does hold a really high profile in people's minds, in the minds of public opinion and in the mind of government officials. You remember when the Queen passed away, the Chinese did insist on sending a very senior state official, one of the vice presidents, to come to the state funeral, even though there was a huge argument about whether or not he should have been allowed to come. And the reason for that is because our constitutional monarchy means that the monarch is not associated with the political stances of the government of the day. They are associated with the United Kingdom as a political force, as a civilizational force on the international stage. And countries like China respect that. They really respect that. And so when someone is ill like this, I think, I haven't seen if the Chinese have put out a statement, but I think we would expect, you know, very civilized responses to that. And then in terms of public opinion, I mean, when Princess Diana passed away in China, that was really, really cut through, actually, because she really had that kind of international appeal in all parts of the world. So I think we can expect a lot of kind of civil responses, even if normally day to day we don't agree on much.
Right. Yeah, I was just wondering, I suppose, Rafe, about the kind of longevity of the institution, if you like. You know, I mean, it's now a much more modern institution we hear today than it even was under the late Queen. Does it have any more incarnations to go, I suppose, is the question.
Well, as King Farouk once said, eventually there'll only be 5 kings left in the world. The king of ace, diamond, spades, clubs, and the king of England. And the beauty of our monarchy, the reason that it's survived, whereas others have fallen in France and Russia and Germany and elsewhere, has been its ability to evolve and adapt with the time. Never being at the cutting edge, but following slowly in the wake of all that. So the monarchy of today isn't the monarchy of the 1990s, let alone the monarchy of the 1960s or 50s. We're seeing very much an effort now by the Prince of Wales and the King to try to actually reform the monarchy a bit to appeal to the youth demographic. Because if there is any danger to the monarchy, it is with the fact that we have the most left-wing youth in history across a whole series of different policy issues. And if it's not able to actually reconnect with the young in some way, then it will have an existential crisis facing it.
Yeah, I think you might be right. You might be in terrible trouble for calling him the King of England as well. People in Scotland will be very upset. They always complain.
King Farouk, not
they always complain.